Are you ready for conversion? We realize your time is very important, and we think we have a presentation that will be well worth your investment. A few housekeeping notes, and I wanted to go over the agenda. As I mentioned, we'll go over a couple of housekeeping issues just to make you aware of what's going on. I would like to share with you the results of the questions that we asked you during the registration process. Then we'll get into Dr. Hackos' presentation, which will be followed by Mr. Gross's presentation, and we expect that we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. Today's webinar is being recorded along with the questions and answers that you present. They will be posted and will be made available to you after the webinar is over, I expect within a week. Our speakers will be taking your questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, you'll notice that there is in your control panel, there is a question box. If you'll enter that question, and then we will address it at the end of the webinar. If we don't get to it, don't worry. We'll still respond, and that will be posted in the Q&A, and we'll also email you a response. Now, during the presentation, we'll have a couple of polls. If you participate, that will help the speakers tailor the presentation to your needs. Also, after the presentation is over, we have a couple of survey questions to help us understand your situation in a little more detail to potentially follow up with you if you're interested in that. Now, if you'll recall, when you registered, we asked a couple of questions. One of those questions was, what is the biggest business problem you face with your documentation? And over 30% of you told us that it was increasing writing load, and almost another 30% said it was maintaining quality across the product lines or department. I find that very interesting because, believe it or not, DITA addresses both of those things. 17% of you said it was increasing publishing load, web, print, ebooks, etc. And XML addresses that. Now, almost 20% of you, 19%, said other. I would love to know what that other was. If you're so inclined, shoot me a chat message or shoot me an email and let me know what other was. That's really I'm curious. That was a large percentage. Now, the second question that we asked was, what is the biggest hindrance to implementing an XML solution? Over 40% of you told us that it was expense and effort, the pain. Another 23%, it was a paradigm shift for the writing staff. And wow, we've heard that, and I think Dr. Hackos may want to touch on that a bit. And 17% of you said it was the length of time to implement. Again, 18% of you, or 16% of you said other, so it's interesting to me what that other was. We are very fortunate to have two accomplished speakers on our webinar today, Dr. JoAnn Hackos and Mr. Mark Gross. Dr. JoAnn Hackos is a noted lecturer, consultant, and author of a number of books about technical communication. She is also a fellow and past president of the Society for Technical Communication. She was an early and vocal advocate of single-source publishing idea. She's also the president of Comtech, a firm that excels in the design and development of content management solutions, usable products, and technology and organizational management. So I am going to make Dr. Hackos the presenter. You should be able to hear her now and see her slides now. And
thank you, Don.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's see if we can get the slides going appropriately here. And I am interested in the responses that people were giving to those initial questions, because I think it's the reasons for wanting to make a change, wanting to make a move, of having more work than people can do, of having that complication of increasing numbers of products that people are supporting with shorter and shorter deadlines. All of those are really contributing to the increase in interest in XML-based publishing, to eliminating desktop publishing activities from our portfolio and really getting to the content. But what we want to really emphasize today is the benefits that you can get from an early analysis of your content, and then a decision that content conversion, moving content within larger volumes into DITA, into XML quickly and easily is really going to be a benefit. But my purpose today is really to ensure that you do that, you start out right, and you do that in a way that's really going to be beneficial to your organization. So just wanted to say a couple of words about our organization. As you can see, we've been in business quite a long time, and we have always focused on making technical information more valuable to customers and helping organizations increase the efficiencies of their organization. So we were, as one of those early advocates of single sourcing as a philosophy of increasing the usability of content. I remember early projects where we kept extensive Excel spreadsheets just trying to track where the content was that had to be updated, so we didn't miss updating that repeated content in all sorts of deliverables. So when we first saw content management systems, the ability to work with an XML source, we said, this is fantastic. There's going to be a huge benefit to the technical communication community, to the learning and training community by being able to use information in this new way. So it's something I've been really excited about for a long time. Very early on in the early part of 2003, I became involved in the DITA solution as a member of the OASIS DITA Technical Committee with IBM and a handful of others who started this process. And we've been very active in improving the DITA model, making that available to more and more people. And then about a year and a half ago, we inaugurated the DITA Adoption Technical Committee to help to get the word out about what this was, how it worked, provide people with training, and really advance the cause of efficiency and productivity in documentation organizations. As you can see just from this little slide, I guess in 30 years I've worked with everybody, probably most of your companies at one time or another, to understand the best practices around processes in technical information development, and to promote efficiencies and quality and productivity, and really to help communicators do the best job that they possibly can. And we've really had a good time, actually a good time, a lot of wonderful experiences with really neat companies in trying to put all of this information together in a really effective way. So if you're not on this list, you should be, and you should consider joining us at the April conference in Baltimore at the CMS Content Management Strategies and DITA North America conference, and you should consider becoming a part of the community. So I'm hoping that this presentation today will encourage that to happen. So let's look at the problem we're trying to deal with. Everybody is on their way, I think, to a DITA implementation or some other XML implementation. Quite frankly, nothing that we'll talk about is going to be strictly related to DITA XML. It could also be DocBook XML or Learning and Training XML specialization, or all sorts of things that you might be considering down the road as a real solution for your content. But we've been working for several years on a roadmap, just what's an optimal series of activities that you can be engaged in and really, work on effectively in the right order to make sure that your implementation of a new way of working for your writers, for your organization as a whole, that works well, that you achieve the return on investment that you have been promising to senior management in order to get that agreement that you can make this investment. And for my strategic planning days, it's one of my very favorite quotes. It says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Well, we'd like to get you on the right road because that's the one that's really going to lead to a good solution to the problems that you're facing and to an implementation that ends up being positive, a positive experience and a positive result for your organization. So I'm going to start with a couple of my favorite cartoons here. The way most organizations need to get started in an implementation of a new way of authoring possibly with the addition of new technology, new tools and technology to support that, is to build a business case. A winning business case means that you're going to get support from your senior management, support not only to spend money, certainly we're asking for money for technology, but also support in acknowledging that changing your content to a new approach is actually going to take real time. I think one of the most essential pieces of support that groups need is the support of recognizing that this new work, this new learning process takes real time. And it also takes good project management within your own organization. So if you're building your business case, one important thing to add into that is the role of the project manager and the role of the information architect, and some time for those people to learn to do those jobs and to be able to implement a really effective project. So I'm going to make an assumption then that you have, or you will be soon, getting your business case together and getting support to do that business case. And then you want to get started in the next phase of your project on really building out your plan, your plan for the kind of new work you're going to have to do. So remember that at the beginning of any good project, in any kind of project management process, one of the earliest steps is planning. Planning what's going to happen. And to do that, I think an important part of that planning is really to take a good, close look at your existing content. Do an evaluation, do a content inventory that says, what is it we have out here? And start to think about, the buckets that you want to put this legacy content into. Things that you want to, you say, we really need to rewrite that. That's not in good shape. We have an opportunity to make it a more effective communication. We want to start by we want that piece to be something we're going to put in the rewrite bucket. And then we want a second kind of decision. We've got some really, we think it's pretty good content. It seems to be on the way to being structured, or maybe it is well structured. It may not be quite what we want in terms of an XML DITA structure, but it's going in the right direction. And that's the content I'm going to put into my what's a convert bucket. And that, we hope, in any organization, that that's going to be a large percentage of what you have available, that you can use the advantages of an automated conversion process to speed your project along. And finally, we want to talk, and I'll talk about each of these in a little more depth, we want to decide what to put in the to move it out of its current environment. So let's take a look at these in a little bit more detail. So I've got my content inventory. You notice I've got my cabinet set up. I've got all my slots, and I'm going to begin to slot my content into those categories. And I've got a what's a convert category. Hopefully that's my largest one, but that's going to be dependent upon the quality of that content. And then I've got a what to rewrite content. That may also be large, depending upon the way you're going to proceed with your transformational project. You want to also know, of course, what to leave behind. We've mentioned that briefly. And I've got kind of a fourth category in here, and that is figuring out what it is that we are going to reuse. Now, in a lot of organizations, that can be, at one level, a fairly simple discussion, and the second level, one that is new and different and complex, because the opportunities that you have in a DITA model or an XML environment in general to reuse your content expands greatly. It's an exponential change in the ability to reuse content, but it's only going to happen effectively if you plan for that reuse. So let's go into a little more depth now in each of these categories. One is rewrite. When do you decide that you've got a bucket of content that really needs to be redone? Well, here's what I look at. When I'm looking at helping people review content, when we're going through a content inventory with an organization that we're helping through a DITA implementation, we're going to ask and look closely at this content. Now remember that as an expert in the DITA model, I look at content through the structured writing, through an eye for structured writing, and for an eye for XML semantics, labeling of content by what it is, not what it looks like. So I can be pretty picky in saying that something is not ready, is not in good shape. Typically, though, we find content that is legacy, that's been written by a lot of different people over the years, that's really irregular. Some of it may be very poorly written, and that material, if at all possible, should not be preserved. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be changed. So I've got a little example here on the screen. In one project, and you may have projects just like this one, we found that there was considerable content. Almost 95% of the content had been developed by subject matter experts. They were not technical writers. They didn't claim to be experienced technical writers. And they certainly had never heard of a standard structure or even consistency in terminology. They had developed that content, explaining the equipment, and then handed it off to the desktop publishers in the marketing department. And in many cases, those were folks who were used to working with layout programs like InDesign or Quark. Perfectly good programs, but programs that end up giving you final output that is unique on every page. So here we had this content written by different subject matter experts addressing the same subjects completely differently, and then formatted in there in the PDF originals from content that was artistically put together. Well, every page was unique. Every heading level was different. You couldn't say that there was a heading level 1 or heading level 2 because each one was unique. It depended on what the page looked like. Much of the content had critical missing information because in the absence of somebody who understood step-by-step procedures and how people needed to learn them, they just left things out. That was not a good candidate for conversion, although we tried, and Mark Gross and I and Don Bridges tried on this one to see what we would get. We were able actually to get some useful conversion out of tables of data, lots of tables of data, and that was very nice. Converted very well, but most of the information needed to be rewritten and to start again from scratch. The advantage we had, however, when we did that is that we were able to put into practice the policy of creating master content that contained the core content that then could be reused across multiple product lines. So the rewriting ended up significantly increasing the amount of reuse of that content to 80, 90, 95% of the content being reusable because it was purpose written for reuse. So there's my rewrite bucket. My second bucket is my reuse bucket. And I want to talk about this a little bit because it's really interesting. We're looking here for content that is repeated in multiple locations and extracting it then to what we dub collection files that are going to hold those collections of reusable components so that we can use content transclusion like the DITA conref or keyref mechanisms to move that reusable content into appropriate places in the final publications. The typical situation, like I have in my note, is identifying hazard statements. Hazard statements are low-hanging fruit for reuse. You can find, we should have that, that warning to the customer, to not electrocute himself or herself should be written exactly the same way. It should be updated once, and it should be everywhere where it needs to be from the same source. And we're we're going to learn, I think, from Mark about the really promising, interesting capability that DCL brings in helping you identify these candidates for reuse within your content inventory. And I think that's a really important part of your analysis, because what you want out of that is to develop your reuse strategy for your DITA, for your XML implementation. How are we going to reuse? What are we going to reuse? What rules will we have about around reuse? Then there's the leave behind. This is content that is unlikely to change in the future. You know, that's content that is going toward end of life, or content that may have minor changes, but it's just not worth fooling with it. You know, maybe this stays in FrameMaker or Word or whatever it was created in. Maybe it also, another thought about this, is it gets converted into a simple XML like DITA-based topic or basic docbook, simply to reduce DESA publishing costs if this content is going to continue to be translated. But it is a conversion process that pretty much takes the paragraphs and bulleted lists and numbered lists and just kind of preserves that, but removes the burden of desktop publishing. And that can have a really significant effect on translation costs. But you have to remember that that content is not suitable to be reused with other content that is actually conforming now in compliance with the DITA standard or with a standard that you're implementing in your organization. Finally, we have the big candidates for conversion. Decide if they are, and we need to decide. We say this is ready. This is ready as is, maybe. And then we've seen situations where we've had really good structured content that's very close with a little cleanup to the DITA standard. Or we need to look at that content and say, should we fix it? And when should we fix it? So one of my big questions about conversion is going to be, do I fix things before or do I fix things after? And both of those will have possibilities, and both of those directions will have will reap benefits. You know, maybe fixing before, actually going through a minimalist exercise. I just came from teaching a 2-day class to 21 people on minimalism, and one of the things we say is that if you have content that is not in the shape you want it to be, the first thing you ought to do is minimalism. You know, you should take a workshop in minimalism, learn about that, learn about the kinds of things that you might consider doing with your content, and make the changes then. But at the same time that you're reducing unnecessary and redundant content, you're also preparing for smoother translation conversion into the DITA standard. So I think there's sort of two things that have to go hand in hand when you're looking at existing content. You know, how close it is it to conforming to the DITA standard, which means you need training in the DITA standard, first of all. And then, is it minimalized already? Do we work on it in our existing tools now, and then do the conversion when it's in better shape? Not saying that it won't need some fix-up, but got really good possibilities there. So begin with minimalism.
Dr. Hackos, could we do a poll now and maybe ask the audience?
Yes, that's right.
How much of your content do you think would fit into the DITA model? So if you can vote and take a moment to vote, and we'll keep this open for maybe 30 seconds, and get your opinions as far as how much of your content would fit into a DITA model. There is no right or wrong answer. And we'll keep this open for another 10 seconds or so. And I'm seeing that roughly 90% of you have voted, so thank you very much for that. So we'll close the poll, and let's see if I can show you the poll, and maybe not. Share. Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. Dr. Hackos, I'm going to turn this back over to you for a moment.
Okay, well, tell me what the results are, Don, because I'm not seeing them.
Oh, you're not seeing them. Okay. More than half was 41%, and then less than half was 33%. All of it was 12%. None of it was 2%. And then another 12% said, I have no idea.
Okay. Well, there's the right place to be. But looks like you said about 41% said that they thought.
Said more than half.
More than half. Okay.
And 33% said less than half. So,
okay. That's pretty good. We've got about 75% of you who are saying we've got some things we think are ready for are close to the DITA standard, but we may not be quite sure. And I think that's a position a lot of organizations find themselves in. That's why the education in the DITA model is going to be so essential to helping you make that decision, helping you decide what to do. So this content inventory is going to be really critical to your success. Okay, so we said start with minimalism. What is minimalism about? I've just summarized it here on the slide. Take an action-oriented approach, emphasize tasks, and emphasize doing before learning about. Ensure that you support users with real-world scenarios and processes that support what they're trying to accomplish in their organizations. Minimalism says emphasize troubleshooting, because most people we find come to documentation when they're in trouble and they're looking for the answers to a question or the problem they're trying to solve. And then, of course, with minimalism, ensure that people can find the content. So part of all of this, of course, is supported by the DITA model. DITA emphasizes task, I think, over concept and reference, and the ability to publish content in multiple forms. As the first step in the process. And by the way, you don't need a single tool to do minimalism. Minimalism is all about planning and design and not about technology.
Dr. Hackos, can we ask another question? Ask the audience, have they incorporated minimalism? Is that
yes.
a fair one to ask?
Absolutely.
So once again, we're going to ask you if you can vote, and the question is, have you incorporated a minimalism strategy into your content? And we'll keep this open for another 30 seconds or so. And we'll close this in 5 seconds as you're pondering your final vote. I almost feel like American Idol or something here. So I'm going to share the results. The results were, Dr. Hackos, interesting. 45% said they've partially implemented it. Another 6% said that they have fully implemented it. Mm-hmm. So amongst the implementers, we're a little over 50%. Mm-hmm. Considering our planning minimalism, but they haven't done it yet, is another 28%. Mm-hmm. And then I've got 16% that said no, and another 5% that are saying, well, now what is minimalism? So,
okay.
So
well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's about 50% who know what it is and have started doing something, and the other 50% are still really figuring it out. Either have it on their radar, or are thinking about it, and then there's a few. It sounds like a few who don't know about it. Well, plenty of information available. You can go to our website, which you'll find out later, and read about what the minimalism workshop addresses. It's the most popular workshop in the world as far as I can see for technical communicators. Okay, thank you, Don. That's great. So let's say we've started with minimalism and we've done our content inventory. We've got our buckets in place. So now we're ready for conversion. And the step in the process that is aligned with conversion is the development of your information model. DITA supports an information model. There's a DITA information model in place that is the DITA standard. But that model is huge. And if I were looking at DocBook, it's even more huge. And what we need to do is really customize all of these possibilities into our own company, personal, departmental information model. So the process that we urge people to follow is, as you begin to prepare your content for conversion or for rewriting, that's the time to be systematically creating an information model for your content. And that information model includes all of these kinds of things. It defines what you mean by the information types. What in your organization is a reference topic? What in your organization is a concept? Are concepts, task, and reference enough? Do you have another information topic, let's say like a troubleshooting topic, that you'll need to create out of the DITA standard? What are the content units that are a part of DITA, and how are you going to use them? What are you going to ask your writers to do about writing a short description or creating a context section within a task? How are you going to apply that in your content? What are the rules you're going to establish around your content? What about inline elements? What about the elements that identify words and phrases, or your metadata scheme, or your overall reuse strategy? Plans for mapping your content in DITA maps and then creating book maps, and all the front and back matter that gets defined through the elements and attributes of the book map. How are we going to constitute folders in either a file system or in a content management system? What file naming conventions are you doing? Are you going to use to have uniformity around file naming and graphic standards? All of these things have to be decided and recorded in an actively growing and changing information model. And without that, you're really not ready to proceed. It's not a matter of everybody doing their own thing. The whole idea of structured content is that everybody does the same kind of thing. And the information model is the rule-setting point at doing that. So I want to make sure my core team of people who's going to work on my initial conversion and implementation is ready to go. I would start with basic DITA training. Understand the DITA technical communication information types, like task, concept, and reference. Learn the basic content units like steps, sections, and tables. And then consider what of this big model you're going to use in your content and how you're going to provide examples and rules that say to your staff members, this is what a step example is supposed to look like. This is the kind of content that should go in a step result. What is that going to mean in our organization? Otherwise, everybody's going to end up doing things differently, and then you will not get the reuse that you'd hope for. Okay, so pilot project. You've got an educated team. They're starting on their information model. You want to choose a pilot project, your first candidate for conversion. Again, choose something that's in pretty good shape. Now that you've learned in your training about the DITA model and you understand it more, you say, this content we think is pretty good, or we're going to do a lot of revising of some of the content before the conversion process. So review the content, review the information types, because you realize that Don and the team at DCL are going to ask you, where does the task begin and end? Where does a concept begin and end? Is this a reference topic or not? Is heading 2 the starting of a new topic, or do they all start at heading 1? Just exactly how is your content? How are we going to reorganize into DITA the content that you already have? And Mark will talk about this in more detail, but think about mixed information types. That's probably the biggest problem that people have. Those include tasks that are in narrative text in paragraphs, not in numbered steps. Prerequisites and post-requisites, they're mixed in with steps, and things are not kind of sorted out cleanly. Background information that weighs down the tasks that really should be separated out as concept topics or as reference topics. All of those things are going to happen in your content. I can pretty much guarantee that that will happen. And you've got to decide, what are we going to do? When DCL comes along and says, what is this, guys? What are you going to be prepared to say? And if it's in really bad shape, do you fix it up in your current tools and then start the conversion process? So what do we want to do? We want to anticipate, by the way, that no matter how effective and organized we think our existing content is, we can almost guarantee that you're going to have to anticipate cleanup activities. Inconsistent, badly structured source content leads to inconsistently, badly structured results. It's like what you put in is what you get out. It doesn't. There's no miracles in between. If you have steps hidden in paragraphs, that will lead to steps hidden in paragraphs on the way out. It's not going to, by magic, make that content better, because there's nothing that you can define in terms of system that will help explain that to a computer. Okay, so what are the things that we could do then? We could fix the topics in advance, use we find people, very diligently going through their FrameMaker files and working with the DITA model and trying to get things straightened out. And it's effective to a point, and then to a point kind of breaks down because the tool doesn't reinforce the rules, or the rules haven't really been quite established yet. There's still questions to be asked. Then you've got to know, as Marco will explain, what can be identified through automation, through the automated processes, and what cannot. One of the things I found to be interesting is that information that comes after steps or in between a step, supporting the step, can be tricky for the automated system to recognize. Is it a step example or a step result or step information? What is that paragraph of information below the step before the next step? If it's just a paragraph, it's really hard to tell. And so you may have to go back and, in the cleanup, identify that by reading it and saying, I think that's what this information is really trying to say. We also know that inconsistent emphasis tags, things that are willy-nilly tagged bold or italic or changed sizes, very hard to tell what that really means. Is that the name of a button on a screen in every case? Sometimes it's not. Is it just there by whim of the writer? What is that going to mean in the consistency or inconsistency of the conversion results? And then consider adding to your activities during this information modeling and conversion phase. Work with the information model template. We have a template that we give to our clients when they start their information model. Develop authoring guidelines, in step-by-step procedures for your authors and how to do the things that are going to be important in the future. Same thing with graphics guidelines. And then think about the process changes that you may have to implement to really make this whole changeover into structured authoring, single source environment, and reuse really, really effective and really successful. The information modeling is, I think, critical to the success of an intelligent and effective conversion process. It requires a strong understanding of DITA. It also means that you need that core team of information architects and writers who can make real decisions about changing content that doesn't quite work, and then willingness to make the changes that will result in better structured content. Sometimes I see teams are reluctant where they'll say, well, we've always done it that way. And I say, well, it doesn't quite work in this new way of working. Think about making some changes. Do you really need 4 or 5 levels of bulleted lists? Is that really usable? Was it ever a good idea to do something like that? And then define your pilot project, test what happens, and show the success of your pilot. Show the potential savings for translation and output that comes from your pilot. Quickly show your company, the senior managers who are supporting you, that you're beginning to get real results. And I think that's going to be critical to the kind of success you're going to see. I want to end with one thought. Comtech can help you in many ways. Minimalism, structured authoring, information modeling. We also invite you to attend any of our workshops or our conferences. The Content Management Strategies DITA North America is coming up soon. There's an equivalent conference in Europe. lots of books that we provide, all of that, is the kind of help that we offer through our organization to get you on a good track. Okay, so a little bit of information. By the way, DCL and Comtech are co-sponsoring DITA Bootcamp in New York at DCL headquarters in New York in June 20th through 24th. So that's something really to look forward to. Okay, Don, I think we're going to turn this over to Mark.
Yes, ma'am. That was very good information.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if I can pull up the magic screens here. Show this one. So if that is working correctly, I would like to introduce our next speaker, which is Mr. Mark Gross. Mark is a recognized authority on XML implementation and on document conversion. He has a BS in engineering from Columbia and an MBA from NYU. He's taught at New York University Graduate School of Business, the New School, and Pace University, and is a frequent speaker on XML implementations. He's also the president of Data Conversion Laboratory, who is a leader in developing many techniques and tools to simplify document transfer and conversion through evolving opportunities. So without any further ado, I will make Mark the presenter and unmute his line, if I can do this cleverly. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Don. And thank you, JoAnn, for a very fine presentation. I'm just going to take a few minutes to outline a few points. What I want to talk about is preparing for a good conversion experience. And many people feel this might be an oxymoron to talk about good and a conversion experience. But and so far, I'm having trouble getting okay. So first question: is it possible to have a good conversion experience? And we think there is a way to do that, and actually I think we have seen over the years many customers who have felt very good about how things have gone. And to emphasize many of the things that JoAnn said, the key is very often good planning and not making the conversion portion of the project an afterthought, because doing it in a rush without planning is a problem. So, and what are the choices really? I mean, throwing it all out and starting over is a pretty expensive option, because when you consider that rewriting materials is, the numbers vary widely, but let's say it's about $25 a page, maybe up or down a little bit from that, which is almost an order of magnitude from converting, which is usually on the order of $3.50 a page, also up and down a little depending on the materials. And it's not just the cost of the conversion, it's also there's a lot of things you lose in the process. If you've got a sophisticated document system you've been using in Frame or something else, you probably have index entries, you've got links in there, all kinds of other things that will have to be redone manually, which is also a complex area, and it's also very error-prone to do manually. And besides that, you also have to usually review all the material and recertify it. So it really is an expensive process. So it's usually easier to use what you have as a base for the materials that are good. And as JoAnn pointed out, some of the materials really are just not that useful, and you should throw them out. But it's probably a good collection, and hopefully the biggest part of the pile that really is good material that you've developed over the last few years. But it needs planning, and it needs time. So the first step in a conversion effort is what can you use for your new system, and that's much of what JoAnn was talking about. But I'll talk about a little bit, just for like the next 5-6 minutes, is what tools are available, how do you go and prepare a conversion specification, and when do you start? And actually, the first thing I want to talk about is when do you start. And this is sort of a schematic of what a conversion time, of what a project timeline can look at. And the traditional way to think about it has not been this way. The traditional way to think about it is, well, you select your CMS, you implement, and then as you're ready to go is when you start doing the conversion and when you train people. And that takes a long time. In a survey we recently did, it turns out it takes 2, 3, sometimes 4 more years for a process like that. And what we're suggesting today is really that there's a parallel track which is a little counterintuitive, that you have a track where you're developing a small pilot and implementing and getting ready to go and figuring out what systems you're going to be using. But at the same time, and very early in the process, you start doing some of that initial training. And that's training in things like the minimalism that JoAnn is talking about and DITA concepts and getting people used to the ideas. Because the earlier they get used to the ideas, the more effective this is all going to be. And then you can start thinking about really early in the process. Usually you think about conversion later on. There's a lot of pre-conversion cleanup that you can do that will really make the process go much more smoothly. So the idea is that you do some initial training and have the people who are working with the documents not do the conversion itself, which can be a very cumbersome process and takes them away from what they're really good at, but go back to the documents they know and do the right kind of pre-conversion cleanup so that the conversion itself goes very, very smoothly. And then there's always going to be some post-conversion stuff that needs to be done because the systems you're working on are probably not doing everything that XML and DITA might be able to do. But that should be pardon the pun, minimal. And in a recent survey we did, people felt that if training was done early, they sort of need a refresher later on. So refresher training as it goes up is very useful. Just in terms of what you can do to clean up your data, there are many issues that can be dealt with automatically, and those are the things. As you think about it, there are things that are very consistent in your data sets, and those can be done automatically. Every time a certain kind of heading comes along, every time certain keywords come along, those kind of things can be done automatically. The things you have to be careful about is that really most people's material has been done over a period of 5, 10, 15, 20 years by many, many different authors, and has not been done consistently. To use JoAnn's words, we're done willy-nilly. And so it's not as easy as whenever you see this word do something, you really have to think about the variations, and some of those may not be able to do. But there's a lot of issues also that really need a human assist because you really can't tell from looking at the document because, and I'm going to do just a couple of these, but basically those things that are very ambiguous, and the tagging could be done in different ways. A list of things can mean different things. It could be that it's an ordered list of things, and everything has to be done. And there's steps that need to be in a certain order, or it might just be a list that's not really designed to be a step, but just a list of things that you do. And there's other places where you might be using the same kind of constructs to mean many different things. So if you can identify some of those early on manually, not fix everything, but maybe put some tags in, put some title in, that really can help a lot. And these are like the 6 items I've got on the bullet items here are the ones that I'm coming across most often. These are very DITA-centric, but the same kind of things happen in any kind of conversion effort. Now, we spoke a little bit about when do you fix things at the beginning or fix things at the end, and it depends what it is. But the advantages of fixing things at the beginning is, first of all, there are analysis tools that let you go, and I'll talk a little bit about that let you go through your document sets early on and identify what things can be fixed. And another major advantage is that your authors are already familiar with the documents and familiar with the systems they're working on, so it's a much faster process to do some of that advanced cleanup on the systems they're familiar with. So they're not learning concepts at the same time they're learning how to work in a completely new system. Because by fixing an old system, they're still learning the concepts. They're not doing all the grunt work, because that can be done automatically, but they are learning concepts. And it can be done early and in advance. So instead of like rushing through a conversion getting all the documents ready in the last month or 2, you can start 8, 10 months early to start cleaning things up with time to do it. One example of what might need to be fixed is very often you find that in your books something that's intended to be a procedure is really shown as a table because that's what it really sort of looks like. Now, if you look at this over here, it's very hard to tell whether this is a procedure or a table. Once you read it and understand what it says, and you'll probably figure out that it's a procedure. But computers aren't really that good at figuring out what the text says. They look at things in patterns. So it's maybe as simple as when you get the structure like this in your document, you put in a tag at the beginning that says that the following is a procedure. And then you can program things so it'll take anything that follows that and puts in the right coding and takes care of things and not making it a table. On the other hand, it may be that all your procedures are done as tables, all tables are really procedures, and then it could be programmed for it. But usually it's a more ambiguous case like this. So you can make those decisions early on. Another example would be the DITA model only allows, only one set of steps is allowed in a task topic. So if this is what if what you see on the screen is the way it looks in the original book, you've really got two sets of steps inside one topic. So the computer's not, what do you do with that? So you either come up with a standard methodology to do that, or you would find these particular instances and fix them in advance so that it makes sense in the DITA model. And this is the kind of thing that software analysis software can come in and find you all those kind of instances possibly. Other things is not enough time to go through them right now, and I do want to leave a few minutes for questions, is the whole concept that JoAnn spoke about finding reusable content. Well, you can do that by hand, but which is fine if you've got 500 pages, but if you've got 10,000 pages, it's very hard to find the reusable content just with a yellow marker. So what we suggest is some kind of automation. What we have we have a software we've built over here that actually goes through an entire set of documents, might be 30, 40, 50, 100,000 pages of materials, and finds all the materials that are not just identical, that's, I guess, relatively easy, but finds all the things that are minor variations, where if your words are different, punctuation is different, and those are all candidates to be reusable content with just minor adjustments. The other thing is figuring out the topics. I mean, when you're going to DITA, again, we're being DITA-centric here, you have to identify what each of the topics are and what kind they are. So you can either do that manually, or what we've been using is sort of a pre-process that goes through all of them and guesses what the topics are likely to be based on keywords and based on what it looks like, and then sends it back out as a worksheet that the authors or familiar materials can go in and check. And if they're correct, they leave them the way they are, and if not, they can make modifications. We find that saves a lot of time. And while all this is going on, you can actually collect all the information you're doing into a conversion specification. So by the time you have to get to the auto conversion, most of that work is done. This is just a format that we like to use, which talks about each of the items that are there. And the assumptions column says, you know, how do we determine when we found a particular kind of entity, and then what it should be coded as when we find it. And that last column is sort of one of those for open items, so we use it as discussion things. So this might be a format that might be useful to do. And rushing through all that, that's sort of what I wanted to cover, and just leave a little time for questions. And turning it over to you, Don. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Those are some great nuggets that you presented to us. So we do have 5 minutes left, and you have asked some great questions. If you want to ask an additional question, if we don't get to it in the next 5 minutes, we will follow up in the post-webinar when we send you the link to the presentation. It is being recorded. I did hit the start button. So I'm going to start with this one. Can you, boy, there are some good ones. How do you implement a practice of minimalism when 80% of your content is authored by subject matter experts with no interest in learning things like minimalism?
That's interesting. I'm not sure that you do. It would be if the content is authored by a group that you have no control over. The best you can do is to try a presentation that says, here are the benefits of minimalism. Or, probably even better, enlist your customers. In the study of customers, you can often find out that customers feel that there is too much content that they can't navigate through. It's too difficult to find content. The kinds of things they're really looking for are not there. We also find from discussions with customer service that the content that the subject matter experts love is not really appreciated by the customers. The customers are looking for something different. So, try to enlist the help of others in the organization to try to make a business case for improving the quality of the content.
Okay, here is another one. I have content that can't be mapped, so it needs to be cleaned up. Is there any way to automate this?
I guess that's a quasi question to me. So I think it, it's one of those answers. The answer is that when people lie, it depends. So I don't think there is content that can't possibly be mapped. I think the question is whether it's totally ambiguous or whether pieces of it are things that can be mapped. And I think the key strategy we like to use is really identify what can be mapped, and then point out the things that just can't be, and those are the things that are done by hand. And the worksheet I described before is really pointed towards that. We go by site subtitles, we go by types of things, and that produces a list of everything that's in the documents, and identifies what is likely to be and that way it's a more defined list and a smaller list, and that's a piece of content experts can go against and look at. It just cuts down the tasks tremendously, and that's really all you can do is that, I think, in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's a good one that just came in. Should one assess DITA tools before creating the business case?
I don't think there's any reason to do that. Lots of people decide that the way to solve all problems is to buy new tools, but if you don't know where you're going, my roadmap at the beginning, it also means that you're likely to buy something that doesn't work for you. So I'd like to see groups get started, develop their business case, get a pilot project started that is very, sort of tool agnostic, and then, learn enough to say, can we make a really good decision? Now, doesn't mean that there's no reason to, get demos and understand what the tools do and what they're about, but don't make decisions too soon.
And I would just add that the pilot shouldn't try to be everything to all people, because then the pilot sometimes becomes longer than the whole project. So it should be very focused on important points.
Right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hackos. Thank you, Mr. Gross. We're out of time. If you have a question, you'll notice on the slide that there is Mark and JoAnn's email address. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to shoot them an email. I'm sure they'd be delighted to respond. And all of the questions that you ask, even those that we didn't get to, along with the recording of the webinar and the slide decks, will be available. Now, when you exit from this, we have a couple of final survey questions for you. If you could answer them candidly, of course, we'd appreciate it. And as Dr. Hackos had mentioned, if you haven't made plans to attend the CMS DITA North America Conference that's coming up in roughly a month in Baltimore, it's a great place to learn from some of the leaders in the XML field on content management and DITA, and interact with organizations that are working with XML on a daily basis. You can find out details at www.comtech-serve.com. So thank you for attending. Have a great day, and we appreciate your attendance. Thanks.